The Sega Saturn is a wonderful console, but its life was complicated. Compared to the PlayStation and Nintendo 64, it was a commercial failure in North America, and while it fared better in Japan, it failed to make a huge impact. But it's no fault of the games. If you dig, you'll find treasure here. Some Saturn games are worthy to be included with some of the very best ever made. But if you want to play games on real Saturn hardware, which you should absolutely do, you're going to be paying a premium. Nothing about the Sega Saturn is cheap. Nothing, that is, until today. This is the Saroo, an inexpensive flash cart for the Sega Saturn. The way it works is very simple. Insert an SD card full of Saturn games into the cartridge, then plug it into the cartridge slot of the Saturn and enjoy almost the entire library of Sega Saturn games. Now, I do say almost entire because there are some issues with some games, but overall, the Saroo is fantastic. It's not perfect, however, and there are some issues, and we're going to talk about all that and more in today's episode. Now, I picked up my Saroo from AliExpress, and the prices of the Saroo will vary from anywhere between $50 to $100 depending on the seller and the features and the extras that the seller is trying to offer you. But we will get into all that in more detail. But first, I think it's important to discuss how the Saroo works, because if you are familiar with the Sega Saturn, defeating its copy protection was something that took years and a lot of eyes on. And if you recall, Dr. Abrasive made a video talking about how he defeated the copy protection of the Sega Saturn many years ago. But as a quick primer, defeating the copy protection meant defeating the CDB or CD block. This combination of chips in the Saturn's motherboard will make up the CDB, and it took a very long time to reverse engineer. But once it was opened up, it did open up the door for mod makers to come up with an optical drive emulation solution, or ODE. And there's currently 3 optical drive emulators on the market as of the making of this episode before the Saroo, and they are the Mode by Terra Onion, and this is something that I've installed in one of my other Sega Saturns. I did this a couple of years ago, and this price is €202, which is obviously quite expensive for those people that are wanting to get into the Sega Saturn. There's also the Satiator, which is probably the best in class when it comes to the ODEs that are out there on the market. It plugs into the video CD port on the back of the Saturn, so it doesn't require any type of internal modification. And you can see this one costs $260. And the third one, which is kind of the most common one that's out there that a lot of people are using, because not only is it a great product, it's also the cheapest product on the market. That is the Fenrir, and this costs $140. Now, unfortunately, the Fenrir and the Terra Onion Mode require you to essentially rip out the internals of the Saturn and replace the CD drive with the actual board itself, and then basically just connect it up to the CD connectors to effectively just replace the CD that's in there. Now, it's important to mention the Saroo isn't actually a brand new product. The project itself began as far back as 2013 by developer TP Unix, who was working to come up with a flash cart solution to emulate the Saturn CD block by effectively disabling the CDB on the Saturn's motherboard and emulating its functionality via FPGA. The initial work was promising, but it was very limited. While it did have some success booting into a small number of games, it suffered from timing issues, resulting in a very small amount of game compatibility. But in 2015, the Saroo project would become open source and available on GitHub, but it remained mostly dormant in the background. Years would go by without much activity, but in 2023, there was a huge update from TP Unix that showed an updated PCB and firmware that was booting into a large number of games. At this point, compatibility was much improved. And finally, we turn to present day. Due to the open source nature of the Saroo, and because it's powered by an old Cyclone 4 FPGA, it would finally come to market, albeit on Chinese stores such as AliExpress. The open source nature of the Saroo meant that we're finally at a point where anyone can purchase their own Saroo for a very cheap price on AliExpress and enjoy it. But the downside is, because it is open source, means that there are many different firmwares going around, and it's not really very clear as to which firmware you're actually getting when you purchase a Saroo. Now, the reason why I mention this is for compatibility reasons. With a forked or a heavily modified firmware, It means there is a greater chance of compatibility issues or crashes. The issue really comes down to the fact that you're not really sure what type of firmware you're getting, whether it's something that's custom, specifically for the seller's Saroo that they're selling on their particular store, or if you're just getting a stock firmware from TP Unix's GitHub repository and not one that has been forked with some customizations. Even though there is an easy method to flash your firmware on the Saroo itself, you have to be very sure which firmware you're currently on before you attempt to flash an updated firmware. Simply put, if you're not really sure what you're doing, you can easily brick your Saroo cartridge, and this obviously is an issue and it can turn some people away. And for me, even though the Saroo is very cheap, very inexpensive, and a really awesome product, this is definitely something that you have to keep in mind. Now, the good news is the particular Saroo that I purchased has a fairly updated firmware, and it's fully compatible with just about every single game that I tested except for one. And in reality, unless you're someone that's trying to keep up to date with the latest bleeding edge firmwares with the latest compatibility, you're probably just going to want to play games from your SD card without having to flash your firmware one time. And this, for me at least, is something that I'm probably going to do with my particular Saroo. Now, the other thing that's going around with these Saroo cartridges on AliExpress, some of the sellers offer two different versions: the normal version, which has refurbished chips on the PCB, and the Elite version, which has all new chips on the PCB. Now, for me personally, it's not a huge deal if I got a normal version versus an Elite version. I didn't really feel like it's that important, but I know some people are very particular about the chips that they do get on a product, especially if you are buying a new Saroo cartridge. You do expect to get all new parts or all new chips on that particular motherboard, but just keep this in mind as well. Now, there are some sellers, once again, that will tell you if you are purchasing the Elite version or the normal, and the one that I purchased was indeed the Elite version, as you can see here. So, does this product actually work, and is it any good? Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Now, other than the price, the second best feature when it comes to the Saroo has to be its loading speed. This thing is lightning fast. Because it does disable the CD block on the Saturn and effectively emulates its own version of the CDB, it means that it can run extremely fast, much faster than the CD drive. And this is something that you really have to see to believe. Take, for example, this comparison here with Virtua Fighter 2. Take a look at the loading speeds here as compared to the Terra Onion mode, which is an optical drive emulator in its own right. Now, the mode is really no slouch when it comes to loading speeds, but the Saroo is extremely fast, and I'm able to load into most games literally in a matter of seconds, and this is really, really awesome to see. And it's at this point I think we should talk about compatibility. Overall, I tested about 30 Sega Saturn games on the Saroo, and out of those 30 titles, 26 of them worked flawlessly. An additional 3 titles did run almost perfectly, but I did experience some slowdown issues in parts of the game where it normally wouldn't happen. In some instances, you may experience some gameplay or some performance that is not quite in line with what you're expecting, and this will definitely throw you off if you are expecting to play a game a certain way. But the good news here is this was a very minor issue for the most part, but it does exist. Now, the last game that I did try was Golden Axe The Duel, and this game did not load at all. It just kind of froze even before anything was supposed to happen. Now, I'm told there are games that do not load on the Saroo, but I'm here to tell you that the majority of games that you love to play on the Sega Saturn, the big heavy hitters like the Virtua Fighters, the Daytonas, the Nights into Dreams, the big games that everyone knows and loves, all of them work perfectly on the Saroo, so you're not going to have any issues. Now, one feature that I would like to see on a future firmware enhancement of the Saroo is potentially having the ability to have a stock CD speed rather than the absolute lightning fast speeds that we have right now. And I do say that because the feature may actually help with some compatibility issues. The Saroo also comes built in with a 1MB and 4MB RAM expansion support, and what's really cool is that it also supports its own virtual memory to handle all types of save support on the Saturn. So for instance, every single game that you play will create its own Saturn save file, so you'll never ever run out of space to save your games on, and in turn you'll never need to keep replacing the battery. The Saroo even will act like a mod chip device where it can boot into a burnt CD or even region-free discs with this particular menu option. Now of course this is the same functionality as the Action Replay cartridge, but it's a nice touch that the Saroo cartridge did carry these features forward. The other really amazing thing that I love about the Saroo is that you don't have to remove your CD drive in order to replace it with a ODE, which you do with obviously with the mode and obviously with the Fenrir. Now the Satiator is a product that you don't require to remove the CD drive from. It plugs into the back of the Saturn as mentioned, but unfortunately it's just way too cost prohibitive for me to ever recommend to anyone to pick up. The Saroo does everything that the Satiator does, and it does it a lot faster in my experience. Now of course compatibility may not be as good, but you really get what you pay for here, and for less than $100, for me it's an absolute no-brainer. So there you have it guys, that is the Saroo Flash Cart for the Sega Saturn. I think this product is awesome. There is obviously a lot of things going on with it right now. Its open source nature means there are a lot of different forks, a lot of different firmwares, and a lot of confusion about which one is the right one to buy. So to make it simple for you guys, I will leave a link to the one that I purchased in the description below. This is not affiliated, it's not sponsored, I'm not receiving a kickback. I purchased this out of my own money, of course. So just have some confidence that if you are wanting a flash cart solution, which you can pretty much just load full of Saturn games and forget about, don't have to worry about flashing firmwares or anything like that, then have some confidence that this product here is going to get the job done for you. At the end of the day, look, this is still very much a hobbyist type product. I wouldn't say it's necessarily ready for commercial prime time, but it's getting pretty close to that point where I do think that the Saroo will become the main kind of product of choice when it comes to Sega Saturn Flash Carts. Its price is unbeatable. You simply cannot beat it on price. Its features are good. It's super fast, and that's one of the things I really love about the product. So buy with confidence and enjoy it. I'm going to leave it here for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.